When ministry is conducted as though care for the congregants is the ultimate goal of the congregation without any missional imperative connected to it, obviously it invites passivity because we are simply on the receiving end of all the goodness of God. Whereas authentic gospel faith has to do with discipleship and missional mandates and extending oneself for the sake of the neighborhood. But that requires agency, and very much of the church does not want to disturb people with an imperative of agency. I'm talking about being engaged in the practice of an alternative economics that flies in the face of our unexamined commitment to capitalism. And when the church practices any kind of alternative economics, people who are uncritically committed to capitalism become at best nervous and more than that, very often resistant to that. But obviously any reading of the gospel has to do with an alternative economics which believes that the goods of the community have to be dispatched for the sake of all the neighbors. And that kind of missional articulation breaks the passivity, and on the one hand it creates energy, on the other hand it evokes hostility. But it seems to me that the church historically among us has been over-invested in spirituality that is marked first of all by privatism, as though it has to do with just being cozy with Jesus, and on otherworldliness, as though the demands and realities of this world are basically irrelevant to what the gospel is about. And of course, that's a huge distortion of what has been entrusted to the church. And when we act as though the news of the gospel is to be getting ready for heaven, or when we act as though the gospel is about just my well-being for me, that obviously robs the gospel of all of its energy and all of its authority. The role of the church is to be imagining the political economy according to the witness of Jesus, and then as we do that imagining, to be engaged actively, politically and socially in bringing that imagination to a historical reality. It is not about being liberal or progressive or socialist. Those are not biblical categories. It's about being neighborly, and that's our mantra. This is our story, this is our song, praising the Savior
all the day long. This is the story.
Christian materiality is the awareness that the stuff of our life that is right in front of us is the place where God meets us with mandates. And so I have proposed that as many church judicatories and congregations have directors of spirituality, it would be very useful to begin to have directors of materiality that helped people think Christianly about the material life that is right in front of them.
Without getting fired?
Well, you have to do that very carefully, and it's not without risk. But if you weigh the risk against the urgent danger in which our society lives, there are some risks that have to be run. The role of the church is to change the conversation. To change the conversation away from greed, fear, and violence. And if you take the opposite of greed, fear, and violence, it's generosity, trust, and peacemaking. That's the only conversation worth having. And the church has the text that can fund that conversation.